He acted like he was my dad.
What do you think that thing was that he put together that you got pulled into, Sarah?
A cult. He predicted that my mom was going to die.
And told them he could see into the future and even bend time.
What did you think?
It seemed really cool.
There were other deaths associated with him.
We had kept this a secret for 10 years. He needed a pure little girl so that he could survive. I was 10, and I was in his bed every night. You try not to remember those things.
All these mysterious deaths, and of course in this business you don't believe in coincidences.
He enjoyed the pain. He enjoyed it.
Today I want to talk about the Angel of Death, aka Daniel Perez. This guy is the worst. He was a cult leader and a bunch of people died, and he also did a lot of horrible, horrible things to young girls. He convinced people that he was an angel who was thousands of years old. He was actually 3 angels.
Daniel, Amber, and Arthur. Like, Arthur was mean, and Daniel was kinder. Amber was the angel of death. So she would come around when somebody was going to die.
He's like, I actually died and came back to life, and this is why I'm thousands of years old. I'm just in this body right now, but this isn't really who I am, and I'm a magical person. Like, I can make it rain, like literally, like make it precipitate, and then I can also predict the future. I can see the past. I know who's gonna die, and if they die, I can bring them back to life. I can heal the sick. I can.
He could tell you, supposedly, when you're going to die. And because of Lou, you would come back. It wasn't weird.
But he was like, there's a catch. The catch is I need something to stay alive. I have a weakness. My weakness is that I need pure love. Pure love. I'm sure you can guess where it's going, and we'll talk about that later. But he somehow manages to get a bunch of people to follow him. He has this commune, and the people start dropping like flies. Like every 2.5 years, death, death, death. Although police have somewhat connected him to 6 deaths, they only ever charged him for 1. And the reason for that was like some technicalities. There are some theories and stuff. I have my tinfoil hat when we talk about the theories. I want to do what I always do on my channel, which is I want to give you guys the facts. Then we'll discuss the theories, and then you can decide for yourself. Right now, I'm going to have to pay my bills because
I pay my bills are paid.
This video is sponsored by Every Plate. Are you surprised if you've been on my channel before? Probably not. Every Plate is actually America's best value meal kit. Did you know that? Why am I being like this? So Every Plate is actually 25% cheaper than grocery shopping. On top of being more affordable, they're very quick and simple. As if that wasn't enough, 100% of their delivery emissions are offset, and they have a 31% lower carbon footprint on average than supermarket meals of the same portion. Not only are they cheaper, but they're easier to make because they're simple, but they don't compromise on quality. They use the highest quality ingredients, sustainably sourced seafood. They meet the Monterey Bay Aquarium seafood rankings. You know that app? I think it's an app. I have it. This particular recipe that I made was so good, and I was able to customize it. So it was originally like a potato bun sandwich, but I tried to like lower the carb and just do it on its own. And it was like this southwestern spice panko with, I love ketchup and mayonnaise together, but then they add the spice to that, and then jalapenos with the lime. Oh, it was so good. So if you're interested, get $1.49 per meal by going to everyplate.com and entering the code Noor149. That's $1.49 per meal by going to everyplate.com and entering the code Noor149. Thank you so much to Everyplate for supporting my channel as long as they have. I truly, truly enjoy their recipes, and I think you should try it. Okay, thank you so much for watching, and back to the video. So the whole thing started in the 90s when Daniel Perez met Patricia Hughes. This was in South Texas. He was 36, she was 19. Patricia ends up playing a huge part in this story because she was his second in command and his ride or die, literally. So Patricia and Daniel dated at first, but then over time, they weren't dating, but they were very, very close. A year after they met, Daniel found himself in trouble because there is a recurring theme here where he likes to be with minor women, girls, women, what? girls. There's an 11-year-old girl who was related to him, and she claims that her mom left her at Daniel's place, and that's when he touched her inappropriately. She told her mom filed charges, he pled no contest, and then he fled. He actually fled the day of his sentencing, and his daughter says what happened from her point of view. She says that she was in high school at the time, and he and Patricia came to her high school, took her out of class, and he basically was like, I can't go to my sentencing, they're gonna lock me up. And he was basically saying goodbye to her. This is when Daniel Perez goes on the run. He starts using fake names, fake IDs, fake social security numbers, and Patricia is helping him every step of the way. In particular, she is helping him keep in contact with his daughter. So she would go and take his daughter to whatever secret location he was hiding in. They would meet and she would take the daughter back. And she did that a couple of times. So now it's a year later, it's 1997, and Daniel is in North Dakota. And what does he do there? He meets another young girl. She's 15 years old. Her name is Cara. And he lies to her. He tells her that he's much younger than he is. He says he's in his 20s, but really he's like in his late 30s. And they have a relationship. Apparently it was consensual. Daniel manages to convince Cara that he is magical, powerful, that he can make it rain. Like literally, she says that she witnessed him make it rain. Like I said, not money, precipitation. So she actually takes him to meet her dad, Cara's father. He's like, this dude is not 20. Like, he's way older and too old to be with my daughter. He assumes that Daniel is an illegal immigrant. Daniel isn't. He's Mexican American. He's a US citizen. But he ends up calling Border Patrol on Daniel. At the time, Daniel is going by the name Lou Castro. When Border Patrol show up to the home, they arrest Daniel. Even though Daniel was a citizen, he didn't want to tell them his real name, Daniel Perez, because they would find out he was on the run for these charges. And so he lets himself get deported to prevent giving them his real name. He gets deported to Mexico, but Patricia brings him back to Texas. Corpus Christi, Texas. Cara's dad thinks he's like gone in Mexico, but he's on the phone with Cara all the time. She doesn't know where he is, but they're still in contact. And eventually she is going to come be with him. And now a new person comes into play, and the first death. That is Mona Griffith. And actually, she and almost her entire family would end up dead. So this is what happened. So Daniel and Mona lived in the same apartment complex. And she had two kids, a young girl and a young boy. And Lou starts talking to her, becoming friendly with her, and some way, somehow convinces her to move into his apartment with her kids. Patricia also meets Mona, they become friends, and now the little cult is starting to grow. Keep in mind, Daniel's still talking to Cara, and now he's convinced Cara to come join them. And they all move to South Dakota, except for Mona's son. He stayed with his dad in Texas. This is when Daniel starts convincing all of them, really, that he is a seer. He could see into the future, see into the past. He could see when people would die. He could also help heal them when they die. And it was because he was this 1,000-year-old angel, actually those 3 angels I told you about, that would inhabit him and guide him. And they were different characters with different voices, and he would do like the voices and characters of the different angels. Amber, the angel of death, was a female angel, and he would do the whole mannerisms of that.
He wouldn't blink. He would get this terrible grin that just looked evil.
Part of what helped convince the other people is Patricia. Because remember, Patricia was the first one, his ride or die. And she would tell them, like, I witnessed him die and come back to life. I witnessed these things. I've seen him heal the sick. I've seen this. And so she would help convince the newer members, and then they would all sort of like feed off of each other. At this point, Daniel is kind of like their prophet. He's not in a romantic relationship with any of the women yet. As a matter of fact, Patricia meets someone and ends up marrying him, Brian. Mona also meets someone, and they get engaged, but they're all going to end up dead. This is where another element comes into play, which is very like Lori Vallow, which, by the way, oh my God, the pigtails, I can't. Like, oh my God. Sorry, I got sidetracked by her pigtails. But, oh, life insurance. That's the point I was trying to make. So Daniel ends up going with Mona and Patricia, and they go to meet with a life insurance salesman, agent, whatever. He said the whole thing was really strange because Daniel was directing everything like Mona's going to take out the policy and Patricia's going to be the beneficiary and this is the amount, but he never signed anything. He was never the beneficiary. He was just telling them what to do. So Daniel tells Mona to put her daughter, Lindsay, the 12-year-old, as the beneficiary, but Patricia is going to be her caregiver. So she's a minor, so Patricia would essentially have control of the money. They take out a $750,000 policy on Mona's life. Soon after this policy is taken out, Daniel, with his magical powers, starts predicting Mona's death. Of course. He's like, I see, she's going to die. And lo and behold, something awful happens. Mona's fiance was actually an experienced pilot. And one day, her fiance, James, by the way, James, Mona, and their daughter, Lindsay, are in an airplane. James is flying the plane, and they go missing. Daniel ends up reporting them missing. While the plane was still missing, Daniel and Patricia go back to the life insurance agent. They have no shame, and they're asking for the money. And the agent is like, what do you mean they're still missing? We don't even have a death certificate. Like, I can't give you the money because they're missing. They have to actually be dead. And he says that they would call and come repeatedly. Like, can we get the money? Can we get the money? And then at one point they were like, we really need the money. Like, we can't pay our bills. We're struggling. And the life insurance agent ends up giving them a loan so they could pay their bills in the meantime. And then though, unfortunately, the plane is found. And it's crashed in this remote area in South Dakota, and there are no survivors. Mona, James, her daughter, they're all dead. And there were some odd things with the way the plane was found.
Normally, if you were landing, you would have your flaps down to slow the plane down. But the flaps were up and the landing gear was down. So the plane crash in itself was odd.
They do an investigation and they come to the conclusion that this was an accidental plane crash. And of course, who gets the money? Patricia. They get the $750,000 and Daniel gets a new Corvette. Mona's relatives were shocked. They're like, first of all, why would she only leave money to the daughter and not the son? Well, Mona's son, he would end up testifying and saying that something really strange happened. He says that after the plane crash, Daniel came up to him and told him, I'm so sorry, Lindsay wasn't supposed to be there, the little girl, and that he was crying. And then he says he took him into a room where there was someone else there and there were some documents, and he told Cody to sign the documents. At this time, Cody's like a young teenager. And so he signs the documents. He says till this day, he doesn't even know what he signed. He says that Daniel told him, don't tell your father. Also, what was weird, there was an obituary that was taken out and it listed Lou Castro, Daniel's alias, as Mona's brother, which isn't true. So Daniel and Patricia, like Daniel through Patricia, I guess you could say, paid for the funeral and the burial for Mona and Lindsay. And it was during there where Mona's relatives noticed that this whole thing was weird. First, they say Patricia was paying for everything with her checkbook, but like Daniel was telling her exactly what to pay for and what to do. He also told Mona's family, don't tell anyone about me and my group, his entourage, the family, whatever they called themselves. Don't tell anyone about this because it's none of anyone's business. A few months after Mona's death, Daniel, Patricia's husband Brian, and Cara all leave South Dakota. They use the life insurance money to buy a home in Missouri. In the process of buying this home, they meet someone else, Jennifer Hudson, the realtor that helped them with the home, who would become one of the cult members and would also end up dead. Jennifer had two daughters, Emily and Sarah. Emily was 10 years old and Sarah was 17 years old. And what happened to them is awful. Like, death may have been better than what happened to these girls. During the course of the sale of the home and everything, Jennifer and Daniel, they become really close, and she starts to believe that he is a seer and that he can protect her and he's powerful and magical and making it rain. She tells her daughters that, like, this guy is amazing. We should join him, follow him, and be a part of what he's doing.
She's like, well, he's actually a seer.
A seer?
A seer. Mom said that he had told her that he was hundreds or thousands of years old and that he could see what was going to happen in the future. And that the reason we followed him was that she just had that instinct and just knew that she needed to be close to him because he could protect her and keep her safe because he knew it was coming.
In 2001, by the time they got to Missouri, 9/11 happened. Daniel starts saying, Boeing wants me to be a consultant on a top secret project because apparently he claimed he had invented, I think, an inverted airplane tank. And so after 9/11, Boeing wanted him and he had to go and move to Wichita, Kansas, which Wichita was like the airplane capital of the world. They had all the production and stuff for airplanes. So it's like where you go for airplanes. And so he's like, they need me, I have to go. And what ends up happening, all his cult members go with him, and Jennifer, she divorces her husband, sells her house, takes her kids, and goes with Daniel and the cult to Wichita. Like, there were 10 acres here that they bought. She bought the other 10 acres. They started building homes, and they had like several homes on 20 acres with like a pool and like a huge garage and like all this stuff. And it's like this huge, big compound. This is where they create the commune and compound that would be known as Angel's Landing, where awful, awful things happened. There's even an airstrip on the property, and this airstrip is called Angel's Landing, okay? Which is where the compound name comes from, because I guess, he's an angel and he's landing, Angel's Landing. So this is when the whole pure love thing comes into play. Remember, he said he's thousands of years old, but if he doesn't have pure love, he gets weak and sick and he dies. It has to be the love of a young virgin, and he chooses Emily, Jennifer's 10-year-old daughter. He convinces the group that Emily needs to sleep in the bed with him, but that nothing's gonna happen, it's just pure love. As you can imagine, it wasn't. It was disgusting. Emily says that he basically forced her into having sex with him in a variety of ways, violently, and if she ever resisted or something, he would threaten her. He would tell her that he would die or her family members would die, and she felt like it was all on her to do this, to like save people's lives, and she's 10 years old. It's just bad, and it only gets worse. When he would do these things with her, he would call it feeding, like he would have to feed. And then he sets his sights on her sister, Sarah. But with her, it wasn't the pure love, it was different. With her, he said he needed to fix her so that she could get married and have babies. And this was his way of fixing her, was R-wording her. And it's so sad because she talks about asking him over and over again, like, am I fixed yet? Am I fixed yet? The two sisters now are living in hell, but they don't tell their mom because he's threatening them and telling them, if you tell your mom, I will kill your family. And so it went on for years. And they said it happened hundreds of times. Daniel would drink a lot, and he also had a lot of guns, and he would get angry. And so there's this one incident that happened that is just awful, just to give you an idea of the terror they were under. It was 2 a.m. and Emily, the younger sister, she goes to wake up Sarah, the older one, and she tells her, come on, let's meet Daniel in the shed, like he wants to meet us in the shed or the shop. He's upset. When they get there, Daniel is there with Cara, and Daniel basically tells them to strip, and he does so aggressively. And the girls are like hesitating, and they're not wanting to do it. So he grabs them by their neck and he tells them, I can kill you if I want to, and they start crying. And then he tells them to stop crying, and they can't stop crying. So because they didn't stop crying, Daniel, he had a gun, like a handgun on his hip, and he was holding an automatic rifle. He shoots at the girls' heads, barely missing them, and they freak out. And then he tells them, strip And they do. And then he tells them, walk to the master bedroom. They go outside of the shop, like it's 2 a.m. They're walking naked with Kara, and they all go into his master bedroom. Now, what happens next? I'm going to give you 20 million trigger warnings on this. This is awful. This was from the court records, this incident and what happened. And it was to illustrate what torture essentially they were under, because some people were like, you could have left, you should have left, like that was the defense. So this is so that you guys understand why they didn't leave and what he did to them. And I'm going to try to say this, you know, as non-graphic as possible. I will put a timestamp where you can skip to so you don't have to hear about this. So he tells Kara to go into the corner, and he tells the two sisters to lay on the bed. And there's really no way to say this. He takes the beer bottle he's been drinking and he puts it inside them. And then he makes Kara drink from that same bottle. He tells her to leave because he needs to feed. And he proceeds to feed on the two sisters. And it's awful and horrific. He does everything you could think of to them brutally. And he makes them do things to each other. And then after that, the next time he asked them to do something, they listened. He started trying to turn them against each other. Like Emily, the 10-year-old, the youngest, he would spoil her. She was his favorite. She got everything. And the older sister, Sarah, he would make her do things. Like there was one time where a new member, a woman with her 8-year-old daughter, came to like visit them, and he made the older sister, Sarah, film her changing into her bathing suit. And he said it was because he wanted to see if she had a special birthmark that would be the sign that they should join the cult. And she did it. And later on, this videotape would be found. Kara, she was a little bit older at this time. She was kind of like his wife, and he would play them against each other. So they were like competing for things. And it was just awful. While all this is going on, he is using the name Lou Castro, but really he's Daniel Perez. Now, that case in Texas, in 2002, something really weird happened. A dead body was found in Mexico, and it had a wallet with Daniel Perez's ID on it. So Texas authorities assume that Daniel Perez is dead, and the charges against him that he was on the run from are dropped. And this is when someone else dies because they're spending money like crazy. And so now it's time for a new life insurance policy. Remember Patricia, his ride or die, the person he's known the longest? Okay, well, he takes her to go take out a life insurance policy, and he puts in an additional thing for an accidental death. And it's basically a $2 million policy. And just like before with the other policy with Mona, Daniel wasn't named the beneficiary. Instead, it was her husband, Brian, and Kara. After he does that, he's predicting her death, of course. He's like, she has to cross over. It's time for her to go. One day, something really weird happened. Patricia and Daniel, they go to the youngest girl, Sarah, and they sit her down. Wait, am I confusing the names? Sorry. Emily is the youngest. Sarah is the older one. The 10-year-old, they go to the 10-year-old girl, and they sit her down, and they tell her, it's time for Patricia to go. And Patricia is there. And so Emily gets upset. She starts crying because Patricia's like a second mother to her. And she's like, no, why? And they're like, don't worry. I'm not like going forever. I'm actually going to come back in a better, healthier body because Daniel's going to bring her back because he can bring back the dead, remember? So this is like for the best, but we need your help. And so she's 10 years old, or 11, I think at this time. She's like, what do you need me to do? They're like, we're going to need you to go along with this story. And basically, the story is that Emily is going to call the cops after something happens, and she's going to tell the cops that she witnessed Patricia slip and fall into the pool, and that's what they want her to do. She agrees, and then a week later, it all goes down. First thing that happens is that Daniel makes sure no one else is at the compound, like the other cult members. He has them go to a car dealership because they love cars. They spend so much money on cars. It's just Emily, Patricia, and Daniel. Also there is Patricia and her husband Brian's little daughter. She had just had a baby, like a toddler, I think 2 years old. Daniel tells Emily, listen, you're gonna find Patricia dead in the pool, and you're gonna call 911, and you're going to say that the little baby fell into the pool and that Patricia went to save her. In the process, she slipped, fell, hit her head, fell into the water, and drowned. And you are going to take the little baby and dip her in the water so that the baby's wet, and it all makes sense. And he's like, do you want to be here, like, for everything? And she's like, no, I don't want to be here. He's like, okay, I'm going to bend time for you, because he can also bend time. He's going to bend time so that she's going to be there, but not really be there. So his version of bending time, I guess, is to tell her to go inside while he does this outside. He's like, go inside, take the baby with you, and I'll come and get you. She says while she was there, she couldn't see what was going on, but she heard a scream, and then she heard splashing. And then Daniel came back, and he was heavily, heavily panting. His arms were wet up until his forearms, and he looked kind of like sad and worried and flustered. And he told her, he's like, okay, you're gonna go out there, you're gonna dunk the baby in the pool, and then you're gonna call 911 and tell them, you know, the story, but wait 20 minutes before you do that to give me time to get to the car dealership. So Emily does as she's told. When she calls police, she tells them what happened. They come, they do an autopsy. They see that Patricia has 3 blunt force trauma wounds to the back of her head, but since they were told that she hit her head when she fell, and then the girl said she saw it and she drowned, so they said that that's what happened, and they rule Patricia's death an accident. Her husband Brian and Kara get the $2 million. Of course, who's controlling everything in that house? Daniel. A month after Patricia's death, Daniel donates about $20,000 to the local police. There's like some vehicle they want to purchase. He gives them money for the vehicle, and he's like, you know, I just want to do anything I can to help this community. The only thing I ask for in return is for you guys to put a sticker on the vehicle that says, like, in honor of Patricia. Aw. Daniel was strategically making a good relationship with the police in the area.
One of the officers in the county dated one of the women there for a while, huh?
That was me.
It was you?
He had Sarah dating officers, and also he had these crazy parties at the compound, and cops were invited, cops would come, cops would party with them. So in the area, like, word spread about the parties and like how much money this guy had, like Angel's Landing, this huge compound, and they have all these fancy cars. The women in the compound, they go to the liquor store and buy like hundreds and hundreds of dollars worth of liquor every week. So this is when the neighbors start to get suspicious. There's one neighbor in particular, his name is George, and he owns like a hobby shop that sells these remote control airplanes, which are pretty expensive. They can be like thousands of dollars. It's like a hobby, you know, it's an airplane loving community, and they do this as a hobby. And he says that Daniel would come in and spend tons of money on these toys, these remote control toy airplanes that were really expensive, and tear them up and come back and buy other ones like all the time. And that he had like this weird story about where he got all his money. He was like, my family, they died in a plane crash, and I got money from that. And then from that money, I have a cattle business out of state, and I sell cattle to the US government. And he was pretending to be a Native American from the Sioux tribe. His hair was long, and he would wear the jewelry. And that was the persona that he was like projecting. But the George guy thought it was suspicious because George grew up on a farm, and he was like, whenever we would try to like talk shop about certain things about farm and cattle and stuff, like Daniel seemed like he didn't know what he was talking about. And so he thought it was really weird. And the way he had the young women with him all the time and the parties, he's like, there's something about this is not sitting right. And then when he went to his home, he was like, this is really weird, because the home was like, it didn't have any sort of personal items. He said, like, there were no pictures, there were no cookware, there was no like family things. It was just his toys and like a big TV, and then fast food wrappers everywhere. He was like, they never cooked. Like, there's no cookware. They just like lived completely off of fast food. He said every time Daniel came into the store to buy an airplane, he had his entourage. He said that like the weird thing too was that Daniel never paid for anything. They spent all this money and he would be there, but like when it was time to pay, the women would pay. He said at one time he had a vending machine at the store and Daniel asked him if he could borrow 50 cents to get something from the vending machine, even though they were spending thousands and thousands of dollars. He was like, the guy bragged so much. He was like bragging, I have naked pool parties with cheerleaders all the time. I have all these cars, like every car that I have is like a special edition or a collector's item. And his cars, the thing that he had for cars, the amount of money he spent on cars would actually be his undoing because it put him on the radar of a particular detective, Detective Ron Goodwin. Now this detective would pretty much become obsessed with this case, would track them for like 10 years, and he would be the one to crack the case. And this detective, he was in the narcotics division, and so at first he thought it was like a drug trafficking thing.
Drew attention to himself with parties, high-optioned vehicles. Each vehicle had an angel vanity plate with a number after it, 1, 2, 3, 4.
Because it doesn't seem like he has a job. Nobody seemed like they worked. When Patricia died, and that $2 million policy cash out was there, he started to be like, wait, is this a drug operation or what's going on here? So he searches Lou Castro and he finds the obituary for Mona Griffith, the one who died in the plane crash. Remember I told you about the obituary where he listed him, Lou Castro, as her brother. He finds that and he goes, this is another death with a life insurance policy where him and his group benefited from the money. And now someone else dies. And so now he's like, wait, what am I actually dealing with here? So this is where his obsession begins. So Detective Ron ends up going to the compound, the Angels Landing compound, and like taking the trash from there, from outside, and like going through all the trash, trying to get like fingerprints, DNA, something, take it to the lab. They couldn't find anything good. And then another time he was driving around town and he noticed one of the fancy cars with the angel number vanity plate, and he sees that Daniel's in the car with another woman and he follows them. He was off duty at the time. He followed them. They went to a restaurant. He waited for them to leave. He goes into the restaurant. He's like, I'm an off-duty cop. I want their like silverware and glasses. And he tries to get prints and stuff off of that. It doesn't work. He couldn't get anything. And he really is just obsessed to the point where he is like driving by their home randomly, occasionally on his off hours, on his on hours. This is when he notices that there's a new person who joined the cult. This person is called Megan. And Megan and Daniel would end up becoming a couple and they would have a child, a daughter. They named her Angelica. Get it? Angel's Landing, he's an angel, Angelica. He finds out that Cara, Brian, Patricia's husband, and the two daughters, Emily and Sarah, had all had life insurance policies taken out on them. And so now he's like, is someone about to die? The thing is, he was right and somebody did die. Brian, Patricia's husband, was very depressed after she died. He never got over it. And he became really close with Daniel at this time. And Daniel would kind of like make dying sound good by being like, oh, one day you'll cross over and then you'll get to see Patricia. If you cross over, you know, you'll see Patricia, like, you know. So one day Brian decides to leave Angel's Landing and go back to South Dakota to visit some family. While he was in South Dakota, another person who's part of the group asked Daniel one day randomly, like, oh, when is Brian coming back? And Daniel says, I don't think he's coming back. And he was right. This supposed freak accident happened where Brian was working on a car, like he was under the car and the jack slipped and the car crushed him and he died instantly. And this was in South Dakota. The thing is, he's experienced at doing this and everyone who knows him they're like, he would have never, that would have never happened to him. He would have never let that happen because he knows what he's doing. The death was ruled an accident. And of course, there was a life insurance payout. The beneficiary of Brian's life insurance was Cara. Detective Ron finds out about this. So he starts going deeper into their financials, getting whatever he could get legally, and he starts to see a pattern. Every 2 years, someone dies and they get the life insurance money from them. They're blowing through the money in 2 years. Their bank accounts get low. And it's like every time their bank accounts go under $10,000, someone dies. Mona, her fiance, and the daughter died. Patricia died. Now Brian died. 5 people in 5 years. And then 2 years later, What do you think happened? Someone else died. It was Jennifer Hudson, Emily and Sarah's mom, the real estate agent.
I was at the house and I tried to call her a couple of times and she just didn't answer. And then about 5 o'clock, Lou comes downstairs and he says, Jennifer's been in an accident. And I said, she's dead, isn't she? And he wouldn't answer me. And that really pissed me off. So I go running behind him and I said, what did you do to my mom? What did you do to her?
What led up to Jennifer's death was the same pattern, right? All of a sudden, Daniel, excuse me, Daniel's predicting her death and she's not feeling well. She's telling people, like in the cult, she's like, I feel tired, like I don't have a purpose. Like they said she seemed really unhappy. And then one day she just said she was going somewhere in the car and she never came back. She ends up driving into like a dump truck, she veers into oncoming traffic and slams into a dump truck. It's ruled an accident. She dies instantly, but like all the eyewitness reports were saying that there's no way she didn't see it. And even when she saw it, she made no attempts to stop. And it seemed like people thought it was intentional, but yet the police ruled it an accident. And because it was ruled an accident and not intentional, they were able to get the life insurance money. So now this is the 6th death in the cult. And she had $1 million policy and it also went to Cara. Detective Ron at this point, he's like, oh my God, if I don't do something, like more of them are gonna die. And he's desperate to try to get Lou Castro, AKA Daniel's fingerprints. So he's asking other officers like for any tricks and stuff. And this one officer tells him, listen, this is a trick, let's do this. Get a glossy photograph of suspects, like fake suspects. Go to his home in Angel's Landing and say there's been some burglaries in the area and hand him the glossy photo. And when he grabs that photo, like you'll get a really good fingerprint because it's a glossy photo. Well, it didn't work, okay? And when the officer gave him the photograph, he grabbed it with the edge of his palm like that, and he put it on a table, and then he would move it around with only his fingernail and like passed it with his fingernail back, and they couldn't even get a print. And so he knew that they were onto him. But the one thing that came out of that was Detective Ron asked him, do you have your ID? Like, can I see your ID? And he's like, no, I don't have an ID, but this is my name, Lou Castro, and this is my social security number. When Detective Ron goes back and runs the social security number, he realizes it's a fake one. Oh my God. Oh, sorry. So Detective Ron files a complaint against Lou Castro for having a false social security number. Sorry, I don't know what's happening with my body right now. At this point, a lot of the cult members are dead. Now Daniel's spooked. He's like, they're trying to get my prints. They know what's up. They found out my social is fake. Like, I gotta go. So he decides they need to leave Wichita, Kansas. They need to go somewhere else. And he wants to go to Tennessee. One of the cult members did not go, and that is Sarah. At this point, Sarah was 24. She goes out and she lives on her own for the first time. This would end up really being the cult's undoing, because while she's out in the world now, away from the cult, she meets this guy. And they start dating. He becomes her boyfriend, and she starts confiding in him, and she tells him everything. But she's terrified to go to police. So her boyfriend ends up writing an email to the FBI and basically telling them everything. Like, this email eventually finds its way to who? Detective Ron. Once Detective Ron gets the email, he finds out that Daniel has fled with the rest of the cult and they're in Tennessee. They also find out that a policy, a life insurance policy, was just taken out on who? His own daughter, Angelica. They're like, they're gonna kill the little girl, they're gonna make it an accident, they're gonna get the money. They end up finding out that he is using the alias Joe Venegas. Using this information, they find out that in the town he's in Tennessee, there was a new bank account that was opened by a person called Joe Venegas. They go to the bank, they get the surveillance, they find the footage of him, and it's him, it looks like him and everything, opening the bank account, and they know that's not his real name. And so they're like, we got him, but keep in mind, They don't know his name is Daniel yet. All they know is he's not Lou and he's not Joe. It's to the point when they arrest him, he gets arrested and goes to jail under John Doe. And he's refusing to tell them his real name. And they're running his prints through the federal database and there's no match. He pled guilty and they gave him 2 years. And Detective Ron is like, first of all, who is this guy? Like, he's trying to figure this out. So he ends up going to talk to Patricia's relatives. And they tell him, oh, there was this guy named Daniel Perez that she like kind of ran off with and he got in trouble in the 90s. So Detective Ron does a criminal record search for a Daniel Perez in that area of South Texas, and he finds that there's a mugshot and it's the guy he knew as Lou Castro. He had these child abuse charges from the 90s, and they're aware of like all the young women around him. They also found out that he was on the run and presumed dead when really he was not dead, he was right there. They decide they need to talk to the younger girls in the cult. When the detective first started talking to the girls in the cult, they were very loyal. They weren't cooperating. They were still going to visit him in prison, and it took several tries for them to get them to talk. They were building a case against him on the child abuse charges. According to the detectives, Emily, the youngest one, she was the last holdout. She was the most loyal. They spoke to her several times and she did not want to speak to them. So that all changed for Emily when she went to visit Daniel Perez in prison, and he had been there for months at this time. And she says they got into an argument because he was healthy. She was like, it dawned on her that, wait, he's been in there for months now and he's healthy, but he told me that he would die if he didn't have the, quote, pure love. Everything sort of crumbled, the facade, because she really believed everything he said. And she's like, you're healthy. You lied. She stopped talking to him, but she didn't go to police. Police were very persistent, and every so often they would reach out again, ask her to talk. And so when they did it again after she got mad at him, she finally agreed to talk. But they did not expect that she was going to tell them that she, when she was 11 years old, was part of Patricia's murder. Now they're like, we have a murder case. They reclassified Patricia's death as a homicide. They couldn't charge him with anyone other than Patricia's death because those particular detectives, it was out of their jurisdiction. They end up sharing the information to all these other jurisdictions, and it's up to them if they're going to charge Daniel with any of them, but they don't. They said they've looked at the cases over again, and they still think that these deaths are accidental. They didn't even change them to like unaliving or whatever. They charged Daniel Perez with murder, and like he had 28 charges, just all the abuse charges, like all the identity theft stuff, the fraud, all of that. He pleads not guilty. And so then the case goes to trial.
I'm asking you to hold this man accountable for all the crimes that he's committed.
Not one shred of evidence that Mr. Perez is responsible for that. Patricia Hughes, an accident.
During the trial, one by one, a lot of the young girls testified, and it was awful. Like, they just said everything. Then it was time for Daniel to take the stand.
Daniel Perez taking the stand in his own defense today.
Did you in any way plan to murder Patricia Hughes?
No.
Did you in any way kill Patricia Hughes?
No.
Was that an accident?
Yes.
Were you even there when it happened?
No.
Did you in any way force sex on Emily when she was underage?
No.
Any way force sex on Emily at any time by force or fear or threat?
No.
Did you tell Emily that it was Tricia's time to die a week before June 26th of 2003?
No.
Tell her that she had to help you because you couldn't be too close when someone passed over to the other side.
No.
Because you could get sucked in because you were an angel, right?
No.
So when he was asked why he went on the run in the 90s, he was like, I didn't go on the run. He said, I was going to go to the sentencing, but I got kidnapped by 4 men in uniforms. who brutally beat me and left me for dead. He's like, I don't know where they left me. I think it was in Mexico or Texas. When he woke up, he had amnesia. And Patricia was there. Patricia saved him. He said that Patricia's the one who gave him the name Lou Castro, that he never knew his name was Daniel Perez until he got arrested and they told him his name is Daniel Perez. Even though he didn't remember the charges or his name, he still knew who Patricia was because they asked him, okay, if you don't remember anyone, how would you remember her? So he's like, no, she's the only thing I remembered about the abuse allegations, like the R word and everything he did. And he said, no, that's impossible. I could never have R-worded anyone because I have a medical condition, a genital injury that actually prevents me from being able to have intercourse with an unwilling participant. So then they asked him, they're like, okay, so this whole angel thing where you say you're thousands of years old, like, did you claim to be thousands of years old? He's like, no, but I smell like I'm 150 years old because I have a lot of horses. And then they were like, did you claim to be a seer who could predict the future and this is why they followed you because they thought you were an angel? He was like, no, the reason why they called me a seer is because I would always say, do you see what I'm saying? And it was just like a nickname for me. They basically denied everything. And then it was time for the jury to deliberate. And it took them like 3 hours only. They came back with a guilty verdict on all charges.
Guilty, guilty, and guilty. Daniel Perez heard that 28 times today.
You know, usually somebody takes responsibility for something, anything, and he accepted responsibility for nothing.
So Daniel ends up getting 2 life sentences plus 400 something months, and he's not eligible for parole for 80 years, which he would be 120 years old when he's eligible for parole. So basically he got a life sentence. After he got sentenced, he sent this weird package to the news.
Daniel Perez sent the box to Deb Ferris. She's here to tell us what was inside.
Well, Susan, this is the box that came to me in the mail last week from Daniel Perez. Inside, we found some very strange things along with this letter.
In it, it says, first and foremost, I did not kill Patricia or rape anyone or anything like that. He goes on to say a detective from the sheriff's department had been following him. Also in the box, Perez sent clothing, a jacket, t-shirts, boxer shorts, along with prescription medicine for heartburn and high blood pressure, even his Social Security card, and files filled with thousands of his court records and handwritten notes from his trial. At the end of his letter, he says, I am on my way to prison for now. I don't know what I want you to do with this. Just read it. I hope someone will tell my daughter that her daddy did not do those things. They said he did. And it was signed Daniel Perez.
He has like a job in prison, I found out, but I couldn't find out what his job was. And then he had like a minor infraction once for unsanitary practices. Now I want to talk about the theories, and really it's really just like one basic concept or idea is he responsible for the deaths? The only thing with Patricia is that he supposedly did it to her. His hands were wet. He held her down. With the other ones, they were alone, and he sort of convinced them to kill themselves. Is he responsible for that? You know, and there's that one case where the girl was texting her boyfriend or something like a million times, telling him to like end his life, and she was found guilty. So, you know, it's happened before. And then she was just his girlfriend. This is a full-on cult. So I feel like he should be somewhat responsible for it. It's clear from the other cult members that they believed him when he had a vision that someone would die, and that they believed him when he said he could bring them back, but they never came back. So he lied to them, obviously. So I don't know. I mean, the thing is, it doesn't seem like he's going to ever be charged with those because, number one, those investigations have not been reopened. And number two, he already has a life sentence. So I don't know if it's just more of just like the principle of the fact of him being found guilty, like getting the justice, because the punishment wouldn't change. Like he would still be in jail. So I think maybe they don't want to maybe put resources towards it, or I'm not sure. I think that he is responsible, at least partially. But also, like, there's a part of it of like your own free will. Like if someone didn't actually kill me and they just said things to me, like it wouldn't work. Like you're not gonna make me kill Look at me. Nobody could ever make me do that to myself. But just because nobody could do it to me, does that mean that other people shouldn't be protected if someone tried to do it to them? Kind of thing. So I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. I really want to know what you guys think, but that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you for watching. Thank you to Every Plate for supporting my channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.